The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Unlock Fantasy. Sign up the promo code SGPN to claim your first-time deposit offer of Trump's bonus cash on Unlock Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Rhythm's college football and NFL projections are now live. Claim your incentive for each other today by going to sportsgamblers.com, rhythmsportsgamblers.com, which is RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It's currently Thursday morning, roughly midnight Eastern Time on August 15th. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to get into the Thursday second round matches in Cincinnati. I'm aware that there was some overlap between the first round and the second round. So on Wednesday, so we did miss a couple of second round matches. The bulk, though, did not occur. So we're going to preview that upcoming slate in a second. Not going to cover all the matches, but most of them. So get ready for the second round breakdown. Now, anyway, before we get into any of the actual second round picks, do want to recap. Before we even get there, do want to remind you once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, remind you, don't forget to rate the podcast on Spotify or Apple. No matter how you're consuming the podcast, either in the live stream format, the post live stream YouTube video format, or even just on Apple or Spotify, you can show support. So like, subscribe on YouTube, or you can rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple if you are still listening to it in audio format only. Plus, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. A lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have sweatshirts, regular shirts, and mugs. Recommend really any of those three options because they're all very affordable, and the shirts especially are very comfortable. Have a couple myself. Recommend you getting yourself something. Different color options as well, so definitely something for you to find there. Plus, that's not just the only show that has merch on the SGPN merch store. We have a lot of great other shows with the network, and the featured show for this week's actually going to be two shows. We have, or technically three. We have the Sports Gambling Podcast, which is the main show with Sean and Ryan, and they just launched their 32 NFL team previews, and they're giving out a $500 circa future for listeners, plus the EPL returns. So make sure to check out the Soccer Gambling Podcast and the Premier League Gambling Podcast for your soccer fix. Plus reminders of wherever you get your podcast, and a reminder to download the SGPN app. Time to get into the recap, though, for the first round. Starting off with the Lock and Dog picks. We had a lot of pressure on us because we had won the Lock and Dog picks for 3 straight episodes, and we continued it as we ended up sweeping again for the first round in Cincinnati. So 4 straight Lock and Dog sweeps. Definitely happy about it, and hopefully we'll make it 5 here on Thursday. Now, for the lock, we had a parlay, had Leheshka money line, and we had Borges money line. That paid out at minus 129. Leheshka ended up winning against Navone. A bit dicey, though, in both sets. First, I went to a breaker, ended up winning that one pretty comfortably. Then he was down a break in the second, broke back immediately, and then he broke again to win the match eventually 6-3, or the second set 6-3. It's a nice straight set win there for Leheshka against Navone. Navone still never won a hard court match. I'll keep fading him, and I think it was a pretty solid price for us. For Borges, though, that was a bit of a marathon as Manarino did take him to 3 sets, but Manarino has not won a match in months, and Borges eventually got the job done as he won comfortably in the third set 6-1. So overall, nice lock winner for us at minus 129, so can't complain there. For the dog, pretty straightforward. Had the Opelka and Shelton tiebreak fest. Had the first set over 12.5 games at minus 120 at a plus 125. That got there. Couple of dicey moments, though. Couple break points that had to be fought off in the first set, but they did, and ended up seeing a 7-6, 7-6 final. So overall, once again, a nice sweep for us. Minus 129 on the lock and plus 125 for the dog. Hopefully, we'll keep it rolling for Thursday, but once again, 4 straight episodes. Definitely happy with how the podcast has been doing lately, and hopefully we'll keep it rolling here for the remainder of the season. Anyway, time to get into the actual first round recap for the event, and I'll throw in some second round recap stuff briefly for some of those matches. Starting off with the matches that took place on Tuesday. Baez ended up beating Giron in a marathon in 3. Darderi beat Tabilo in straight sets. Good win for him. Perricard did lose to Zhang. Not surprised, thought that'd be a competitive matchup, and Zhang did win in straight sets. Tiafoe beat Fekina in straight sets. That was competitive, though, and Fekina probably should have won the second set, but Tiafoe did get it done in the straight sets. Leheshka got the job done. Mickelson did win in 3 against Griekspoor. Fun match there. Good win for him. Thompson beat Humbert in 3. That was a fun comeback as he lost the first set, then came back and won in the breaker. Shelton beat Opelka. You saw Musetti beat Jari after losing the first set. He won back-to-back breakers, winning in 3. Nishioka beat Kekmanovic in straight sets. Nakashima pulled off the upset against Fritz. Controversial Hawkeye moment there, which I'll mention in a second. And Fees beat Holt in straight sets. As for the matches that took place on Wednesday, you ended up seeing Nori drop out again, so he's still not healthy. Felix ended up burying Kovacevic 6-3, 6-1. Borges capped off the parlay for us with the money line against Manarino as he won in 3. Morozin beat Mutet in straight sets. Tsitsipas beat Struff in a competitive matchup in 3. Rune beat Berrettini in 3. You saw Purcell beat Monkic. Sinner did not look great, but he beat Mickelson in straight sets. That was the second round match there. Draper beat Munar in a final set breaker. We saw Papiron go immediately into the night as he ended up losing in his first match post 1000 title as he was exhausted and he ended up losing to Monfils. Not surprised. I'm sure he celebrated after winning in Montreal and he had a massive letdown moment against Monfils. Busta beat Korda. Kind of the same story with Korda. He had to play multiple weeks in a row, winning DC, making a deep run in Montreal. He was exhausted, and Busta beat him comfortably after a very close first set. Echeverry beat Arnaldi in 3, a classic 3-setter by Arnaldi. I feel like all his matches go 3. Tiafoe beat Musetti comfortably in straight sets. Baez lost to Thompson in straight sets. And Leheshka capped off the night session with a straight sets win against Medvedev. Now, overall, I'm going to start off with the main I'd say talking points. I was going to fade some guys based on fatigue, and so far that has worked out relatively well. We'll see how Rublev plays on Thursday, but Korda looked like he was potentially going to be exhausted after having the back-to-back deep tournament runs. He had nothing left in the tank. Papiron no-showed the event as well. Not a shock that some of those guys did lose early. We'll see if Hurkacz and Rublev also end up losing early on Thursday. Besides that, I think the main takeaway for me was Fritz, once again, kind of underachieving in a big tournament, as Nakashima did beat him. There was a Hawkeye controversy, which I'll have to mention now, where there was the second week in a row that we've had a controversy around Hawkeye, where they ended up not making a call. The ball was clearly out. They played the point onward. Then they stopped the point midway through, and they replayed the point. The only thing I have an issue with there is if the ball's out and you know it's out, why does it matter what happened in the shots afterwards? If the shot was out, the guy won the point. I don't really know what the problem is. We had that moment in the Fritz match where Nakashima hit a ball long in the second set, and there was no call. Fritz played it. They played about 2-3 more shots. They stopped the point, and they said, redo the point. They showed the Hawkeye view eventually, and the ball was clearly out by a foot. I don't understand the rule. If Nakashima hit the ball out of play, why does it matter when you make the call afterwards? The ball's out. Why would you replay the point? He hit the ball out. I feel like it should have been Fritz's point. I don't understand the rule. I'm not going to get mad at the chair umpire for it because the same thing happened to Tiafoe against Tabilo about a week prior. But the rule doesn't make any sense. If Hawkeye's going to make mistakes, then I don't know why you can't just go according to what the call should have been at the time instead of making up this redo policy where, oh, you kept playing, so we have to redo the point. No, you don't. The ball was out. The point's over. Like, I don't know why this is so complicated, but that's been the second straight week we've had an issue. We have to work on the Hawkeye technology. Maybe it's just a U.S. issue, or I should say a North America issue because we saw it in Canada as well. But that was one controversy that ended up happening in the match. Didn't matter in hindsight as Fritz did win the second set anyway and then lost the third. So it had no impact on the match, but it definitely seemed like it was a weird moment, and I feel like that rule needs addressing. It's one thing if Hawkeye's going to be wrong occasionally, and that has happened in back-to-back weeks, which is not a good look optically speaking, but I still don't understand the rule. If the ball's out, then just give the other guy the point. You don't have to make up the song and dance about how, well, you played it, so therefore the ball's still alive. No, it's not. The ball's out. Just make sure that you give the guy the point when the other guy misses the shot. It's not that complicated. Fix that moving forward. That rule does need to be fixed. Besides that, the main talking point was Medvedev, who ended up losing in straight sets to Leheshka. Good win for Leheshka. I thought he might be vulnerable potentially after having the, let's just say, interesting match against Navone in the first round where he looked fine, but he did look a bit vulnerable in his first match in a couple months. And then he had a massive step up facing off against Medvedev, who has been a solid hardcourt player in years past. Of course, he won a U.S. Open, made a U.S. Open final as well a couple of times. So I do think that it was kind of a shock to some that Leheshka did beat him in straight sets. Now, Medvedev had a bunch of chances. He had a bunch of breakpoint chances early. I believe he had a breakpoint chance in 3 separate service games in the first set. Didn't convert any. Then he punted the breaker, and then he immediately kind of had a mental breakdown, and you ended up seeing him fall apart again in the second set. Medvedev has now lost back-to-back matches in his first match in Montreal and in Cincinnati. A really bad look for a hard court specialist, which is what he called himself about a year or two ago. He has been playing really poorly over the last couple months, and I feel like he's going to have to go to the drawing board. I can't really explain what the main issue is. The serve is not as good as it used to be. the double faulting issue is alarming, and he double faulted, I think it was 6 or 7 times against Leheshka in that match on Wednesday. But it's also the return game. Leheshka was very aggressive. He was willing to come to the net a bit more, and that has been kind of a counter strategy to Medvedev's deep return position. But it just seems like he's not as patient as he used to be, and the shot selection's not great. He's not been very good on clutch points either with breakpoint chances. It just seems like Medvedev's kind of all over the place right now, and he's going to have a meeting with his coach or work on something in practice, because whatever he's doing has not been clicking, and he's got to kind of address it because he's not won a title in over a year. So I think he's going to have to go to the drawing board, sprinkle in something, maybe more serve and volley. Maybe, I don't want to say it's going to be standing closer on his return points, maybe against some opponents, but it just seems like Medvedev is kind of all over the place, and he's going to need to change something going to the U.S. Open, because right now he's on, I'd say, he's on a path to get eliminated very quickly in the U.S. Open. But wanted to mention him, who has been struggling a lot recently. I see Mel mentioning that he's struggling mentally. Definitely not wrong. But there is something to his game, strategically speaking, that needs to be addressed. And it feels like his coaches haven't addressed anything. So I want to mention it. Point is, it does seem like it's a spot where he's going to have to definitely fix something. The serve needs work. We'll put it that way for now. Double faulting's been awful. But it's mostly a mental thing. He was berating his overall, I'd say, box for the majority of that second set. And it was kind of ugly to watch. And it feels like he is just on tilt all the time in poker terms. So I think he's going to have to work on that, maybe just mentally or just emotionally. He's going to have to build himself back into the stoic figure that we remember. But it's just not there anymore. It just seems like he's getting too emotional in matches, and it's affecting his overall patience and his shot selection. And that's a bigger reason why he has been struggling over the course of the past couple of months. Anyway, time to get into the actual preview for the second round matches taking place on Thursday. But before that, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because they have their solid payout now for their potential entries. If you go 8-0, you can win 325 times your entry, which is a great deal for you. Or play fantasy football the right way with Best Ball. Best Ball Mania is now live with $15 million in prizes. And Underdog just launched their season-long college football projections, higher or lower on your favorite college football players. You can now use specials and boost on all flex entries. And of course, the WNBA is back. So if you want to go for some entries here, I don't mind potentially going for, we'll go with Hamby. We'll go with her lower on her rebounds at about 10.5. You could also potentially look at Courtney Williams. Don't mind her lower on her PRA at around 21.5. So Underdog also has WNBA. They have you covered, and it's good to have the WNBA back. But a reminder that you can sign up the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time positive offer of $1 bonus cash on Fantasy. Promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the recap of the first round, and a couple second-round matches took place on Wednesday. Now it's time for the second round matches taking place on Thursday. Starting off with the first match on the schedule, you have a matchup which should be a fun one between, let's see, where do we want to start here? We'll start off with the Italians, actually. We'll get into the Darderi against Caboli match. For this one, Caboli's a favorite, as Caboli is around about minus 160. Darderi's around plus 140. For the spread here, -2 for Caboli, +2 for Darderi. For the over-under, 22.5 games. Slight juice on the over, though, minus 120. Set wagering, though, Caboli in straight sets is plus 165. Darderi in straight sets is plus 300. And the over 2.5 sets is around plus 125. So looking at the head-to-head between them, you have seen a history that has been completely barren. No actual matchups between them in their careers, which is kind of shocking. Thought they'd have a random clay matchup over the years, but Caboli's been fine. Beat Paul in the first round. That was not on Wednesday, so he had a day off in between, which is pretty fortunate for him. Darderi ended up winning his first round match against Tabilo. Same story. I believe he did not play yesterday either, so both guys have a bit of rest. Point is, though, should be a fun matchup. I think that Darderi is a solid player, but Caboli is definitely the better player, and we saw him make a final in a 500 event about 2 weeks ago in D.C. He should win this. The question is, does he win in straight sets? I think I'd lean that way. You can make an argument Darderi can make the match interesting, and he did look good against Tabilo. Maybe if you want to go for a breaker, or if you want to go for the over in games at 21.5, I can see a breaker here. I think for value, I'd probably lean to the over in games. It's actually 22.5. So they're expecting a close matchup. Maybe the spread is what you want to take. I'll lean Caboli in some capacity here. I think he's better than Darderi on hard court. I think he's in better form. So I'll lean to Caboli. Minus the 2 in this matchup. Should be fun, though. I don't see a blowout. I see a close matchup, but I think Caboli gets there in the end. Moving on to the next matchup, you have one of the best matches on paper for the card. You have Zverev taking on Khachanov. Now, Khachanov has not looked that great since coming back from injury, but he did look pretty good, or I should say he had some moments in the last couple of matches. He ended up beating Diallo in straight sets in Montreal, lost to Rinaldi, but he did beat Cerundolo, only dropping 3 games into those 2 sets in the first round. Zverev, though, we know, did have a decent showing in Montreal. Then he lost to Korda in a match he probably should have won, had a breakpoint chance in the 3rd set, ended up choking it. Then he got boomerang braked on 2 double faults in a row, and he ended up losing 6-4 in the 3rd set. He also choked away the 1st set, though, in that match, as he was up a break, and he choked it. So Zverev's been fine. Khachanov, we know, has been kind of underwhelming recently, and we'll see how he looks in this one. Didn't look good in his first round match, but that was Cerundolo's first hard court match in months, so not going to overreact too much to it. For the sake of this matchup, though, Zverev on the money line for this one is around minus 360. You see Khachanov at around plus 290 for the spread here, minus 3.5 for Zverev, plus 3.5 for Khachanov. For set spreads, Zverev minus 1.5 sets is minus 125. Khachanov plus 1.5 sets is minus 105. Over 2.5 sets is plus 160. I got to mention the head-to-head for the two of them because we have seen some interesting battles between them in the past, and it has been close. Now, Zverev is up 4-2 in the head-to-head. Faced off in Miami this year, Zverev did win 6-1, 6-4. Faced off in the Olympics in 2021. That was the second most recent meeting. Zverev did win in straight sets. So one meeting within the last basically 2-3 years. So not much to really go by based on head-to-head, but Zverev did beat him on hard court earlier this year when he was in better form in March. So the point is, I think Zverev's going to win in straight sets. Khachanov looked good against Cerundolo. Not going to fully overreact to. We know Cerundolo can be a very, I'd say, volatile player. He was in great form in Umag, and in the Olympics, he had a couple of good rounds. But on hard court, he's fine. He's not an amazing player by any means, and he did have some time off post-Olympics to rest up, and I just think he came out flat. So Khachanov looked good in the first round. I think some of it was circumstantial, and I do think that Zverev's a massive step up in competition compared to Cerundolo on hard court. So I am going to go with Zverev to get the job done here. Still look good in Montreal. Did choke away the match to Korda, but I don't trust Khachanov's current form. Give me Zverev to get the job done in straight sets at minus 125. Moving on to the next matchup. You have a fun one between Zhang and Rublev. Now, Rublev, a reminder, did face off against Papiron in the final in Montreal on Monday. So fatigue could be an issue here, and that has to be worth mentioning because he's minus 300. So Rublev in this matchup is around minus 300, and you're looking at Zhang being around plus 250 or so. For the spread here, minus 3.5 for Rublev, plus 3.5 for Zhang. Over-under is around 22.5. For the set spread here, Rublev minus 1.5 sets is even money. Zhang plus 1.5 sets is minus 130. Over 2.5 sets is plus 135. For the head-to-head, Rublev is 2-0 in the head-to-head. And to mention the actual meetings, face-off this year in Dubai, Rublev won in 3. Face-off in Astana in 2022, Rublev won in straight sets. Now, Zhang is a talented player who you can argue has a limited upside, but he can threaten you on any given day. He's a solid overall player, good baseliner. Now, Rublev we know is better, but we have seen some players struggle early in the event with fatigue carrying over from Montreal. So Rublev does fit that criteria where he had to play 5 matches in Montreal. He had to play 2 matches on the 10th, 1 match on the 11th, and 1 match on the 12th. So not exactly a great spot for him. Does have 2 days off in singles, had to play doubles on Wednesday. But the point is fatigue could be an issue, and Rublev also is battling a stomach issue in that final against Papiron where he got destroyed 6-2, 6-4. So I think for the value, I'm going to have to lean to Zhang here, and at least for the games, plus 3.5. I can see the over in this one, but taking Rublev at this price after going through a gauntlet in Montreal with no real recovery time is not a great spot for me. So I am going to pass on that. Give me Rublev to potentially struggle in this matchup, and as a result, I am going to go with the dog here to maybe get the job done on the money line, but I think I'm going to lean to the over and to the plus 1.5 sets instead at around minus 130. I don't mind the over 2.5 sets, though, at plus 135 either. I'm moving on to the next matchup, jumping around quickly. Next matchup, we're going to go to Draper against Tsitsipas. For this one, Tsitsipas around minus 200. Draper's around plus 163. Faced off in Montreal, actually, 2 years ago. Draper did win 7-5, 7-6. For the recent performances, Tsitsipas has been struggling as he ended up losing to Djokovic in the Olympics, then lost to Nishikori immediately in Montreal, then beat Struff in 3 in his first round match. Draper had to go to a marathon against Munar in the first round, win that one in a final set breaker. Now, Draper did win the head-to-head meeting 2 years ago on hard court. I've mentioned this before. Maybe you remember this if you are a longtime listener to the pod. Tsitsipas historically is really bad against lefties. I don't know why that's the case, but his backhand, I guess, does not stack up well to the cross-court battles with the opposing forehand. So I think Draper's alive to win it. You could argue that fatigue will be an issue because Draper went to 3 against Munar, and Tsitsipas had to go to 3 as well. But his match was generally shorter because we know that Struff ends points pretty quickly. So I do think for the sake of this matchup, Tsitsipas is understandable. It's understandable why he's a favorite, but I don't trust him enough. He got rid of his dad as a coach, thank God. I think that partnership should have ended a long time ago. But I don't exactly trust his current form. Struff is a good win. I think Draper can give him problems, but most of Tsitsipas struggling with lefties in his career has been a constant angle that I've mentioned on the show, and it's worked out. So I'll go with Draper at, in my opinion, a decent price here. Draper you can find at around, for the money line price, around plus 160. I don't mind it. I see an over. I see 2.5 sets. I see a marathon here. Maybe a final set breaker again, but I am going to go with Draper in this one to get the job done against Tsitsipas. He's been going back to his old head case ways, and I think getting rid of his father is the smart move in the long term, but he's kind of now with a little bit of a gap there in the coaching staff, and I think there's a bit of a transition period between Tsitsipas and his coaches, so I am going to go with Draper in this one. Moving on to the next matchup. I am going to save, by the way, a couple matches for the lock and dog picks, so I'm going to skip over a couple matches, and I am going to go back to them later after the break. For the next one, you have, we'll go to Rune against Borges. For this one, Rune is a decent favorite. Rune is around, for the money line here, Rune is around minus 333. Borges around plus 250. You're looking at Rune being 1-0 in the head-to-head as he did beat him in Acapulco on hardcourt last year, 6-0, 6-2. Absolute bloodbath. Now, both guys had marathons in the first round. Rune did beat Berrettini in 3, and Borges beat Mannarino in 3. Now, we know, obviously, Berrettini is a better win than Mannarino, who has been winless in multiple months. Now, Borges has gone to a couple of marathons so far in Cincinnati, had a breaker in the first set against Vukic, won that one in straight sets eventually, went to 3 against Wolf in the first round of qualifying, then beat Mannarino in 3 in Montreal, went to 3 against Kecmanovic, went to 3 against Humbert, and lost in straight sets to Nishikori. I like the over 2.5 sets again. Common theme. Rune, we know, is a solid player, but he can be a head case, and I do think he might be in line to drop a set here. Rune is a little bit too volatile for me to trust. We saw that in the first round against Agut in Montreal. He should have buried Agut, and that match turned into a bit of a sweat for a bit. So I don't fully trust his consistency, and I think mentally there might be a screw loose or a wire that's a bit, I'd say, faulty. So I'm going to lean to Borges to win a set here. I think Rune probably wins, but I think that Borges can make the match competitive. I don't mind the over in this one. I definitely don't want to lay 333 with Rune. I'd argue that it's Borges or pass, but I am going to the over. I think Borges can win a set before eventually losing in 3. For the last match, I'm not going to preview Monfils against Alcaraz. I think Alcaraz wins. Not going to really go through that too much. For Ruud, though, against Felix, which is the late match on the card. Very interesting because Felix is minus 130, give or take, and you are looking at Ruud being around about plus 110. For the actual game spread, -1 for Felix, you have +1 for Ruud. The over-under is around 23. Now, we saw Felix win comfortably against a pretty underwhelming player, in my opinion, in Kovacevic, who I've been low on for a while. I don't think he's very good. Simply put, he won 6-3, 6-1. As for Ruud, he ended up retiring, or I should say he quit, in Montreal before his match against Korda, so that resulted in a walkover. So I don't know if Ruud's actually healthy. That's kind of the main question mark here. I don't know what his fitness level's at. And I mentioned in the preview episode, the same thing I'm going to say now for the actual outrights. I didn't take Ruud because, 1, I don't trust him. 2, if you have the U.S. Open on deck and you dropped out of a 1,000 event prior to a match because of injury, Why would I assume you're healthy? Like, I just don't trust Ruud's fitness right now. And Felix, I think, can give him problems. They are tied 4-4 in the head-to-head. We saw them face off in the Olympics, and Felix did win. So they did face off recently, was competitive, did go to 3. Felix should have won it in straight sets. He choked away the second set, but he eventually got the job done in 3. Faced off in Madrid this year. He won in straight sets as well. The problem is the meetings on hard court are all dated. They were in 2022 or earlier. But the 2 meetings this year on clay were both won by Felix. We know Ruud is a very solid clay player who constantly makes deep runs in the French Open. So a good win for Felix nonetheless in both cases, in the Olympics and in Madrid. I'm taking Felix here. I think that the price makes sense. You could argue that Ruud would normally be a favorite based on the ranking. But based on the walkover that happened against Korda in Montreal and based on his current form, I can't trust him. I don't know what I'm getting. So Ruud, if he really does not feel well, might quit in the match. So I do recommend taking Felix in a book that actually grades moneyline bets if a full set's completed. But I think Felix has value, and I think it makes sense he's favored. So give me Felix in the money line in this one. But that's going to wrap it up, though, for the second round preview. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks for the second round. Before we get into any of those actual plays, though, want to remind you once again, they're brought to you by Rhythm because football season's here. College football and the NFL models are now live on Rhythm. Create your own model or let Rhythm do it for you. You can let Rhythm decide what model you should be using, or you can let stats that matter to you the most be really the focal point of your own model that Rhythm can help you create. The other way, though, you can use their AI projections from MIT Data Scientists. You could also use their picks for NFL Week 1 and College Football Week 0. Once again, you can create your own account, and when you do, claim the 7-day free trial today by going to sportscampus.com, sportscampus.com, so RTHMM. We're also brought to you by Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions. Circuit Sports is back with Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. The Nova Triple Day for Las Vegas, so what are you waiting for? Ultimate Cuts weekends are a great time to go. You can hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the bar events at the World's Bet Sportsbook from August 22nd through 24th. Use promo code SGPN. Use promo code SGP15 to get 15% off your hotel room for the sign-up weekend. And a reminder, sign up in person at Circuit Sports between now and December 7th. Use a proxy to play for anywhere for the contest. We also have a deal with the proxy. Go to proxy.footballcontest.com. Save $50 with the promo code SGP. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the second round matches for Thursday. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I'm going to go to a matchup I did not talk about between Dimitrov and Morozin. Give me Dimitrov in straight sets at -118. Covering why I'm going to go with Dimitrov in straight sets. First reason, Morozin looked fine in the first round against Moutet. The issue, though, is that Moutet is still not a great hardcourt player. We know that he's been in good form this year when healthy, mostly on clay, but Moutet on hardcourt is not great. And it was a very competitive matchup. Morozin did not serve that well, especially with the second serve. He only won 38% of his second serve points. So the point is, it was really a toss-up. He got broken 3 times against Moutet. Moutet's not a great hardcourt player, and the reason why he won was because Moutet is also not a great server, so Morozin had a bunch of breakpoint chances. But I think Morozin is still not in the greatest of forms right now. He has not been playing great tennis. He has lost a couple of matches recently, and I do think that beating Moutet in a competitive matchup in the first round does not instill much confidence in me that he's going to be able to hang in there with Dimitrov. Dimitrov did lose somewhat early on in Montreal, but a reminder, he lost the inevitable champion. Did lose to Papyron in a 3, but he had 3 match points in the second set. So in hindsight, that loss actually aged pretty well because he had 3 match points to beat a guy that eventually won the title. So Dimitrov was in good form. We saw him beat Hichikata in a murder, a 6-0, 6-1 in the first set, or 6-1, 6-0, you get the point. But he was in good form, lost to a guy that we thought was a bad loss at the time. Turned out to be a decent loss, and he probably should have won that match. So I think Dimitrov's in good form. We know he's a solid hardcourt player. He's been playing at Cincinnati for a long time, basically a decade plus at this point. And I think that he's the better player on hardcourt, so I think he's in line for a good showing. Plus, they faced off on clay. I'll admit it, but it wasn't the French Open this year, and Dimitrov only lost 7 games. He destroyed Morozin. I think it's a bad matchup. I think that Morozin is still not going to be able to defend his second serve too well. I think that Dimitrov will serve a lot better than Moutet did, and I think that Dimitrov has a very good chance to win this in straight sets. But in hindsight, the Dimitrov loss to Papyron actually aged very well, and I do think that he's going to have the firepower to make life difficult for Morozin. So give me Dimitrov to win in straight sets here at -118 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to a matchup between FiZe and Nakashima. For this one, give me the over 2.5 sets at plus 130. Nakashima has lost at least one set in 3 straight matches. Did a good job of beating Fritz in the first round, but we know he can be a bit streaky. FiZe, though, has lost at least one set in 3 of his last 4 matches. The one exception was against Holt, who's pretty much well known as being a decent challenger player. So a pretty decent step down in competition for him in that first round matchup. So I'm not going to overreact to FiZe's great form against a weaker opponent. I think it's a good matchup between 2 guys that should kill each other, and the head-to-head suggests it. Faced off 2 times this year. Both meetings were in 2023. Both meetings did not end in straight sets. So based on the head-to-head history and based on the volatility for both guys individually, give me a marathon. Give me the over 2.5 sets in the FiZe-Nakashima match with my dog at plus 130. So once again, the picks for the show, the locks will be on Dimitrov to win in straight sets against Morozin at minus 118. The dog will be on FiZe and Nakashima over 2.5 sets at plus 130. That's going to wrap up for this episode. A reminder, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the MLB show. Find me on the WNBA show. We just had an episode for the return of the second half of the season. Check that out as well. And until next time, you can find me a reminder I'll be back here for the Round of 16 episode, probably Thursday night, if I had to guess. We'll see how many lines are out, but keep that in mind. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.